We figured it out. Okay, and now I want to go back to, where did I put my pen down? Huzzah! Okay. Ten years later, we finally got there. Okay, so when we are looking at the heart, there are the main thing we're going to do today is we're just going to again trace the flow of blood through the entire heart system as well as through the blood vessels. So we're going to start with the pulmonary side. Like always, not that it matters, the blood flows into the atria at the same time as each other, so it happens synonymously. I just always start with the pulmonary side, but that is up to you. So again, pulmonary is blue because it is deoxygenated, not that your blood is actually blue. And so that blood will flow in to the right atria from the superior vena cava. So it goes in through the superior as well as the inferior vena cava. So I always just draw that arrow popping out the side, showing that the blood is flowing in there from the inferior vena cava. Again, these words should trigger in you, not inferior, superior. Ugh, sorry. Okay. Inferior vena cava. Okay, those words should trigger in you. Superior meaning from the neck up, so from the head or from the brain, that blood is flowing down into the heart. The inferior vena cava, all of the blood is coming up into the heart through there from the rest of the body. Okay, then that flows into the right atrium. Okay, I had a couple of good questions about this actually. Is there a difference between atria and atrium? So atria is just the plural form of atrium. So if you're talking about one of them, it's the atrium. If you're talking about both at the same time, then it is the atria. So yes, there's that. So the blood flows through the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava and then pools in that right atrium where it's held until the heart is ready to pump that blood. Then the blood pumps it through your first valve, which is your tricuspid AV. Okay, I do want you to know that it's the atrioventricular valve. So AV or atrioventricular valve. Okay, and that valve has those two main purposes. The main jobs are to hold the blood in the right atrium before the heart is ready to pump. And then when the heart contracts, it forces that blood through the tricuspid valve, and then that valve prevents that backflow of blood, keeping the blood in the ventricle. Okay, so continuing on its path, that blood then rushes into the right ventricle. Okay, where it's held before it's going to get pumped out to the next, through the next valve. So again, these chambers of the heart, the atrium, the ventricle, their main job is to just hold that blood before it moves somewhere else. It captures all the blood, and then once all the blood has reached that pocket or that chamber, then the heart is going to beat to force it out. Okay. So once all the blood has pooled in there, it is going to go through the next valve. let's do that up over here, which is your pulmonary semilunar valve. Okay, the pulmonary semilunar valve, which again has the same jobs as the tricuspid AV. So that semilunar valve holds the blood in the ventricle before the heart beats, forcing it out. And then when the blood is on the other side or has been pushed through, it prevents that backflow or that backrushing of blood in the heart, which again, if you remember, causes that heart murmur. So heart murmur is when there is the valve doesn't quite close, and so you have a bit of that backflow, which is not good. It means your heart is not working as efficiently as it can. And then from there, the blood is going to get pumped out to the lungs through your left and right pulmonary arteries. Okay, so out on that side, and then out on this side here. Again, to the lungs. And that's your right pulmonary artery. Okay. So now the blood has left the heart and is moving on to the lungs. Again, when we reach these arteries, remember with the arteries themselves, they are basically large tubes that will carry the blood at a very high pressure. So the blood has just been pumped directly from the heart, from the ventricle. So the blood is rushing really quickly. And so that artery, its main job is to just provide the space for the blood to move and move as quickly as it can. So like a large highway. So not like a little narrow road with cars parked all along that you have to like weave on through, but this is like your like 4-lane mega highway, just get them through as fast as you can. Okay, so that's your artery. From there, if we continue to follow the blood on the track through the body, it's going to move from the pulmonary artery of the heart into your arterioles. Technically, it's a pulmonary arteriole because it's going to the lungs, but you can just call it the arteriole. Okay, so it's going to branch from those arteries into slightly smaller tubes that hold the blood, called the arterioles. Again, not much structure to them. They just provide that space for the blood to flow, but they're slowly starting to slow down how quick the blood can flow, so that once the blood reaches or branches again to form capillaries, the blood has fully slowed down so that the oxygen transfer or the nutrient transfer can happen. And so again, with those capillaries, that's our first highly refined structure. So those capillaries, again, they are 1 cell thick. Okay, they can only hold 1 cell of blood. So 1 cell stream of blood. So the blood isn't all clumped together anymore. It's just 1 cell at a time passing through those capillaries. Again, to help with gas exchange. As well as the nutrient exchange and everything else. So those capillaries are highly branched. They're also likely to rupture. So if you rupture your capillaries, you'll see a bruise. Anytime you have a bruise, it's because your capillaries have slightly ruptured. They repair themselves really quickly. Again, they're just 1 cell thick, so it doesn't take long for those cells to replicate, which is why we don't worry about bruises too much. Usually they are a-okay. So from there, at your capillary, that is where the blood picks up the oxygen. So again, that gas exchange. So now it has become red after those capillaries. Ooh, I want that to be brighter. Okay, so from the capillaries, now the blood has picked up oxygen, and so it turns red in a diagram. Okay, because it's picked it up from the lungs. And now it is going to move into a venule. Okay, these venules again are small branches where the capillaries meet together to form that venule, now with the oxygen-rich blood. And the venules have that highly refined structure again, where they have the muscle, the smooth muscle surrounding them, in order to help pump that blood back to the heart, because the blood has lost so much pressure through the capillaries, it's really slowed down. And so now we want to pick up this pace again through the venule. And so it has that smooth muscle that can help force the blood through that vessel, and then also it has valves inside of it to force the blood to keep moving up the ladder. So there is a great diagram in the slides that you can look at where that blood is pumped by the smooth muscle and then catches on each ladder rung of those valves in order to continually force that blood back to the heart, continue to pick up the pace. From there, it's going to move into a vein. Specifically here, this is your left pulmonary slash systemic vein. Okay, and there are just two of them. Okay, so again, I had a few questions about this. So the pulmonary, or is it the left pulmonary vein or the left systemic vein? So here you can actually use either term because it is coming back from the lung, but it's also oxygenated and it is now going to move into the systemic side. So you can use either when you're labeling. So yeah, again, you can use either one because it is coming from the lung side, but it has that oxygenated blood, and so it's moving into the systemic side. So in your labeling, use either one, that's fine. Again, this whole transfer of blood also happens on the right side. I'm only going to draw it on the left though. So the blood also comes in through those right pulmonary slash systemic veins on that right side, and then is going to pool into your right atrium. Okay, same deal as on the left side. So that blood is going to be held in place by your bicuspid atrioventricular valve. So the blood is held in place by that bicuspid atrioventricular valve. Okay, then the heart is going to beat. Again, this happens at the same time as the right atrium beating, but in our walkthrough, it just helps to do it as two separate sides. So then the heart beats, forces the blood through the bicuspid into your right ventricle. Oh no, sorry, this is all the left. I don't know why I'm writing the right. This is all the left atrium. Sorry, did not mean to confuse you. Left atrium, left ventricle, left pulmonary venule. I think it's because I said the right pulmonary vein on the right side, and then I just continued writing that down. So we are on the left side of the heart. Okay, so that blood pumps through the left ventricle, is held in place there by your next valve, which is your systemic semilunar valve, or the aortic semilunar valve, either one. Okay. Once it reaches that valve and then pumps through, it is going to pump up and out through the aorta. To the rest of the body. Remembering that on this side, the left ventricle is so much larger because it needs to be bigger in order to force that blood up and out to the entire body. So it requires a lot of force, unlike the right side, which just needs a little bit of force to get it to the lungs. So again, that left ventricle side is much larger, and is the reason that we say that the heart is on the left side of the body, though in reality it's just in the center of your chest cavity. Okay. Then it moves through the aorta. Your aorta is really just a large artery, so it's going to follow again that same path as we listed before. So it's going to go from the aorta, and then it's going to branch into your arteries. Again, because the aorta is so large, we give it its own term. So then it's going to branch into those arteries, then to arterioles, then to capillaries. Once it reaches those capillaries, it is going to lose its oxygen because it is giving it up to the body and is taking on that carbon dioxide. So from the capillaries, it's going to flow back into our venules. Okay. Then it's going to flow into your veins. And then depending on where it's coming back from the body, let's say that this was going to the head, it is then going to join up with the vena cava and start the process all over again. So that is the entire map tracing of the blood circulating through your body. So in through the vena cavas, through the pulmonary side of the heart to the lungs, through the arteries to capillaries to veins, back to the systemic side of the heart, pumped through the left side of the heart to the body, where it will then give off that oxygen and come back and cycle through and through and through hundreds of times a day. Okay. So this is what you do need to be able to do for your quiz tomorrow. Your quiz is just going to be a written test. So I'm not going to ask you to each verbally explain this to me because it would take so long. But you do need to be able to write this down and list what is happening. In addition, the last thing that I want to talk about, is it the last thing I want to talk about today? Yeah, so the last thing I want to talk about is, again, that chart. Let's do it in black. Sure. Okay, so looking at your ECG, Hannah, you have a question? Go for it, as I draw this. With the short block tomorrow, do you want me to? Oh, okay. We can chat after, Hannah. How about that? I'll think about it. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was this chart here, which I want to draw slightly better. There. Okay, so this is your ECG, your electrocardiogram. Sometimes you'll see it as an EKG machine, but ECG is generally the terms that we use in Canada. So your ECG measures your heart rate, and it's just that electronic output of what is happening in the heart and the different beatings of the heart. And so we have the two different phases that you need to know about, the P phase and the QRS phase. Okay, so in that P phase, the main thing that is happening is your atrium are contracting. So this is your atrial contraction. Okay, and your QRS phase, that is your ventricle contraction. Okay, so in the lub sound, when we talk about our lub dub, so our atria contracting and then the slamming shut of those valves is what causes that lub sound. Okay, that one's actually quite quiet in comparison to the ventricle contraction. So often, unless your heart is like really pounding, like really, like you're really exercising your heart, generally you won't actually feel the lub when you're measuring your heart rate. Generally, you'll just feel the ventricle contraction because it's so much stronger. The atria contracting and that slamming shut of that valve is actually quite weak in comparison. And so your resting heart rate, you're just going to be feeling your ventricle contraction. Fun fact, just so you know. But that is your dub sound. And I believe that that is all that I really want you to know for the quiz tomorrow. So again, the walking through of the heart, where the blood is going to, where it's coming from, and how it flows through the heart itself, as well as the ECG machine reading. Do you have any questions on that? So the quiz is just the circulatory system, not yes. Yeah, so the quiz is just the circulatory system. Your mark for the nervous system came directly from your presentations. So we're not going to be doing a quiz on that because really all of these systems are so detailed and in-depth, but specifically with the nervous system, there is so much. And so, yeah, I wanted to just base your mark off of that presentation and what you were concluding from that versus from a formal quiz. Any other questions? We don't need to know about nodes in the signal. So, oh yes, sorry. Yes, you do. But just briefly. So I'm just gonna pull this up. Can I switch it over? Come on. Sorry, my computer is being very slow right now. There we go. Okay, so there we go. Okay, hopefully you can see this that I'm switching over to now. So this is the slide showing the different nodes that you need to know. I don't want to draw it on my diagram because it might get a little overwhelming, but you do need to know the flow of that nerve impulse in tandem with the heart flow. And so again, just a brief overview of what you need to know. There's not a ton of depth that I want you to go into with this, but just know that one, the heart controls its own pace. It controls its own nerve signal through these nerve fibers. And so it's not controlled by the nervous system itself. And that impulse from the heart starts in the SA node. It moves through the atria, forcing them to contract. Once they've contracted and the blood has flown out, it goes to the AV node, and then from the AV node through the bundle of His and into your Purkinje fibers. Once the signal reaches those Purkinje fibers, it forces the ventricles to contract. And this system, the main thing you really should take away from this, in addition to the flow of that, so SA to AV to bundle of His to Purkinje, is that this is what forces the atria as well as the ventricle to contract in tandem, so at the same time. Otherwise, it would just be pumping sporadically, which is not beneficial. So yes, please do know this as well. Okay, any other questions? Stop presenting. Oh, come on. There we go. If I write Purkinje, will I get it wrong? Do your best. Do your best with spelling. I'm looking for overall thought, more so than just memorized spelling, but do your best. Great. Any other questions? I know it's a lot of information, but we'll have all of this class to continue working through this. Great. No other questions? No. I don't know how to do this. Here we go.